Hey there, Sam Visnick here, and welcome to this new video. We're going to be talking about sacroiliac joint dysfunction. Does it exist? What is it? And what are the factors that contribute to stabilization of these joints? So stay tuned. So the big question is, first of all, what are the sacroiliac joints? And if you're not aware of them already, the sacroiliac joints are the two joints on each side of the sacrum, which is the bottom bone of the spinal vertebral column. As it meets those two bones on the side, we oftentimes refer to them as the hip bones, but they are called the ilia. Now these ilia, as they mix with the sacrum, create a joint, and that is what's referred to as the sacroiliac joints. Now, this is a hotly debated topic as to whether or not these joints actually move. Some research shows that it has very little movement, and I'm talking 1 to 3 millimeters of movement, while in other people these joints don't move at all, or they may have fused joints. So that makes this whole thing tricky when it comes to understanding whether or not these joints can be dysfunctional, and of course the big question is whether or not they can generate pain. So just realize that this is a hotly debated topic amongst the experts when it comes to this. Now, when we talk about SI joint dysfunction or SI joint pain, most of the time, and probably the reason why you're here watching this video, is because you have pain in the sacroiliac joint region. And what that usually means is these two bumps on the side of the spine here, when you go down and out to the side a little bit, those two bony projections are called the posterior superior iliac spines, and they present right there on the sides. That is roughly in the area of about a $50 size, around the area where most people oftentimes report they feel pain, and that's where they think they may have SI joint-based dysfunction or problems. Okay, so the challenge with this is, of course, is that pain oftentimes can be more generalized or can refer. So therefore, just because there is pain in the area where the sacroiliac joint is, does not mean that the sacroiliac joint itself is the pain generator. Okay, so if there's any issues or pathology in the lumbar spine, facet joint issues, disc issues, and so forth, even trigger points in the multifidi muscles or some of the muscles along the side of the spine can refer down into the sacroiliac joint region. Another area that can be problematic is, of course, the nerves that come out of the lower thoracic region as they go on top of the iliac crest area, this section here. There can be pain in that diffuse area too, which is oftentimes caused by the cluneal nerves being aggravated as well. So sacroiliac joint dysfunction is, again, I could go back to this, say it's a hotly debated topic, but what we're concerned about is how do we address the pain that's in this area? Well, addressing pain as a whole always has certain steps that should be followed. Number one is ruling out medical pathology. So therefore, if you've just been in a car accident and maybe there's damage to the sacroiliac joint ligaments, or two, recent pregnancy, which causes laxity of those ligaments, there can absolutely be some area problem in the sacroiliac joints themselves. But outside of that, most of the time we're talking about chronic sacroiliac joint problems. And chronic means it's been around for a long period of time. Oftentimes there is no mechanism of injury, meaning there is no fall or car accident or anything like that. So when we're talking about dealing with this issue, whether or not those joints move, we should understand all of the elements that can contribute to why you might have pain in that area. Step number one, getting to the doctor and getting ruled out for any serious pathology. So outside of that, then we have to understand that there are two major mechanisms here at play when it comes to stabilization of the SI joints, and then we're going to talk about that in a moment here. Okay, so we've got the two major elements that are involved with stabilization of the sacroiliac joints. We call this force and form closure. Now, the reason why we have two different categories here is because the sacroiliac joints themselves are highly irregular joint surfaces that actually tend to sit together. It looks like a locking mechanism. The design of the joints is inherently stable. And it's meant that way because of the amount of forces that get translated through these joints, which is one of the reasons also, because of the way those surfaces fit together, why there is minimal movement in those actual joints. So that's where all that debate comes from. So we actually have the structure or the design of the joints, And of course, those become affected by when we stand upright and we have the pressure of the spine going down in there, which tensions that area. Okay, so there is a degree of stabilization, a strong degree of stabilization, just from the design of the joints. The second area, which is what most people are concerned about, is the aspect of the muscular elements as it contributes to stabilization of the joints. So it's important first and foremost to understand that there are no muscles that specifically move the sacroiliac joints, right? So there's the psoas muscle, the glutes, none of these actually move the sacroiliac joints, but there are many muscles that cross the sacroiliac joints which can influence force distribution throughout that area, okay? So on the front side, of course, you could see that one of the major muscle groups that crosses this area is the psoas, that psoas muscle which always gets blamed for virtually everything. We have the iliacus muscle, and then on the back side here, you can see that there's a lot of ligaments, which I'll be talking about on another video. And of course, that we have a lot of muscles on the back side here. We have the spinal extensor muscles that cross the top. We have the multifidus. The multifidus goes down multiple layers and attaches on top of the sacrum. We have the glutes, glute medius, all of these different muscles that connect all of this stuff in together. On the front side, as we go up, we have the abdominal muscles. And in particular, one of the muscles that is associated with a degree of stabilization of the sacroiliac joints is the deepest abdominal muscle, which is called the transverse abdominis. Now this muscle, which is oftentimes associated with full exhalation or sucking the belly button in, has a degree of pressure inward on these two ilia, which can contribute to the tensioning of the ligaments on the posterior side. So these muscles, as you can tell from where I'm going with this, there's a lot of activity and association of muscles around the sacroiliac joints. So there's not just one muscle that if you were to strengthen it or do something with it is all of a sudden magically going to resolve sacroiliac joint problems. Okay? So what we have to look at is how all of these muscles are associated and working together in order to transmit forces across the joint. So another way of thinking about this also is that if we go back to the simple action of gait, which is walking, every time our foot moves through and our heel strikes the ground, we have an activity of deceleration that occurs. Our hamstring muscles fire, the hamstrings connect to ligaments across the lower back and then go into the opposite side of the body. And this whole chain reaction occurs. And that is for efficiency of movement. It helps us save energy. It helps store kinetic energy to move off to the next step. And of course, that has a strong influence on where the forces are being distributed throughout or not distributed throughout the entire body. So dealing with all of these issues all at once is really critical to overcoming this sacroiliac joint thought to be dysfunction. Okay, so another thing I want to clear up here and address is the thought process of mobilization of the sacroiliac joints. As previously discussed, we talked about this, that the sacroiliac joints themselves have very little movement, and in some people have no movement at all. So oftentimes you'll go on the internet, you'll read about all these different sorts of dysfunctions of the sacroiliac joints, upslips, downslips, torsions, and all this kind of stuff. And again, we move into that land of hotly debated topics as to whether or not these things, number one, can be accurately assessed, and number two, whether or not they can actually, first of all, I should say exist, then assessed, and then of course things that you can do about them. Okay? So it's very unlikely that that's the case, but that does not mean that specific movements will not assist with making you feel better. And I provide certain mobilizations of the SI joints, very simple ones that you can do by yourself and some that you can do with a partner assisted, which can assist with balancing the muscular elements around the joint. One in particular that we do is a 45-degree knee reach, like a poking exercise. Another one is a leg pull at a 45-degree angle, which will assist with, number one, decompressing the hip and causing the pelvic bone to rotate backward, and that may actually influence relaxation of the tissues on the backside of the spine. So mobilization of the joints themselves, highly debatable, but our mobilization work for the hips, for the pelvic area, and the lumbar spine may be super helpful when it comes to dealing with pain in the sacroiliac joint region. Okay, Okay, last but not least, no discussion on chronic pain should ever go without talking about, which is the concept of taking a holistic or holistic approach to working with chronic pain. We know that there are many elements that are involved in chronic pain. It's very complicated, and we need to talk about, number one, understanding the situation. I'm always a big fan of pain education. The more you understand about pain, the less pain you'll experience, the less suffering you'll experience from it, and you'll feel like you can get back to doing the activities that you love to do. Number two, we've got to talk about all of the things that involve our lifestyles, which may be contributing to increased irritation of the nerves in that area, and then again promoting more pain. I do talk about this on a separate video, so make sure that you check that out. I hope this video has been helpful for you. If you have any questions at all, feel free to comment below. Give this video a like. Let me know if you want more videos just like this. Sam Visnick here. Thanks for watching.